The story of Saul and his conversion is one that is taught repeatedly in Sunday school. Raise your hand if you can remember. I shouldn't put it that way. Raise your hand if you remember learning about Saul's conversion in Sunday school. Most of us. It was on the list every year as I went through Sunday school as a child. And, you know, one of the things I remember is the part of this that was the miracle, if you will. The fact that Saul was blinded by this great light on the way to Damascus. The fact that this voice called out to him from heaven to say, Saul, why are you doing what you are doing? And the fact that this disciple of his in Damascus, someone that we don't even really know by name, ends up healing him. It is a spectacular story of faith and strength. But that isn't the main point. You see, what we know about Saul is what a bad person he was leading up to those days. Persecuting and even killing those who followed Jesus. It is interesting, therefore, to see Jesus' response in the vision, in the dream to Ananias, when Ananias questions him and says, but Lord, this is the guy who's been persecuting and killing all of us, and he's come here to take us back to Jerusalem to face the chief priests and be arrested. And Jesus says very specifically, I have chosen him to be my instrument to the Gentiles and the kings and the Jews of Jerusalem. That is an incredibly powerful statement. Think about that one for a moment. Jesus literally saying that I have chosen this man, this sinner, this man who kills people, to be my instrument to spread the gospel of love and life to the world. For most of us, maybe all of us, that is really hard to swallow. We want to have a moment alone with Jesus to say, what are you thinking? Him? Of course, in doing that, we would have to admit that none of us are worthy either. You see, we are all sinners. We all fall short. We all judge others. We all at times are even mean-spirited to others. We all at times say things we wish we could take back. We have all at times even done things we wish that we could take back. So the fact that Jesus chooses Saul as an instrument of the gospel should be of great relief to us, because it means that all of us at some level are entrusted with this love and this gospel, this light, this life, whether we are worthy or not. Let's be totally honest here. The two most powerful figures in that first generation of the church were Saul, who would change his name to Paul, and Peter. Let's take that for a second. Saul, the one who had been killing Christians and persecuting them. Peter, the one who denied even knowing Jesus on the night in which Jesus was betrayed. These two could not have failed more epically if they tried. Really. And yet, they are the two that are chosen by Jesus amongst so many to have the loudest voices for the gospel in their day and age. It tells us something about mercy and forgiveness and grace. It doesn't have to be earned. Saul certainly did not earn this grace. It came to him. He didn't go to it. And yet, here he is, entrusted with the gospel of grace and love. And that should be the second part to this story, which brings warmth into our hearts. The idea that we as human beings, no matter how faulty we may be, are entrusted with the grace and the love of the gospel in our time to our generations in this place. We don't need to be perfect. We certainly don't need to be experienced. Saul wasn't. He was way off on the wrong side of the whole equation here. And yet, the Lord chooses him and says, this is what you're going to do, as with so many prophets from the Old Testament. We don't need to be worthy. We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be experienced or brilliant or anything. We just need to say yes when we are called. Say yes when we are called. We're all called in different ways. We're called into our jobs. Every one of us, I don't care what anybody does for a living, every job in this world has an impact on the human race. Every single one of them. It could be our calling to go out into the world and share the gospel and spread love and welcome people. Build relationship with our brothers and sisters in the world. Or it could be a parent, grandparent, or even just to be a role model and mentor to someone. You see, you don't need to be a pastor or a musician to have a calling for God. You just have to be willing to say yes and be willing to love others. Because in loving others, you do answer the call of the gospel. So let's take a look at the other person in this story, Ananias. How would you have liked to have been him? Ananias knew exactly who Saul was. He was the one coming to arrest me. And here the Lord is saying, I want you to go heal him and take care of him and feed him. It's all good. Can you imagine being Ananias? I mean, the first response out of Ananias' heart has to be, absolutely not. I don't want any part of this. The last thing I was going to do was introduce myself to the guy. Ananias was probably planning on hiding. And here, Jesus is telling him, go, introduce yourself. Take care of him. Help him get stronger. Ananias had a terrible choice to make in his heart because all he knows of Saul is the persecutor and the killer. And yet, you want to talk about blind faith? How about Ananias? All right, Lord. If that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. I have no idea what the outcome of this is going to be. I don't think it's going to be good. But if that's what you want, I'll do it. Saul and Ananias, they end up becoming co-workers for the gospel. They end up becoming friends. Ananias takes care of him, strengthens him, heals his sight. These two, who had been on a collision course for absolute disaster, ended up being on a collision course for God's love. What a remarkable turnaround. But then again, we know that all things are possible with the Lord. Even this. So yes, we learn about faith. And yes, we learn about mercy and grace, that it doesn't need to be earned, that it's gift, it's free. We also learn one other thing. Disagreement, conflict, hatred, anger. All things can be healed by God. All things. Here were two people on the opposite ends of the spectrum who hated each other for their faiths and who ended up walking hand in hand into the books of history, sharing love with each other and with everyone they met. As we look at our world today, sometimes we just want to sigh and shake our heads and say, it's just not fixable. Ananias and Saul prove to us that when God acts in the world, amazing things can happen. People on each end of the aisle, so to speak, can stand hand in hand and share love with the world. It can happen. Thanks be to God. Amen.